Larry Elwell, Elwell.
And when is your birthday?
December 17th, 1930,
Where were you born?
Tulsa, Oklahoma, USA.
Tell me a little bit about your parents and maybe siblings that you grew up with.
Well, my mother and father were from Massachusetts, and they moved to Oklahoma in 1926. In 1928, my brother Ronald was born in Tulsa. In 1930, I was born. So my mother and father had two sons. And we grew up in Tulsa. My brother joined the Army when he was 17. I joined the Marine Reserves when I was 18. And then I was activated in the summer of 1950. Harry Truman activated the reserves to make up the 1st Marine Division to save South Korea from communist domination. And I got on the troop train in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and came to Camp Pendleton for training, and then shipped out on a troop ship in early October 1950, landed in Japan on the troop ship, and then made an amphibious assault on Wonsan on the east coast of Korea on November the 4th, 1950. Happily, there wasn't any enemy force to greet us on the beach. They'd all fled. After MacArthur's successful Incheon landing, the North Korean forces had retreated, and so it was fairly calm where I was until the Chinese attacked us on November 27th, 1950. And that's when I was at Udamne with Dog Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Regiment, 1st Marine Division. And in one night, November 27th, we went down from full strength, 230 men in Dog Company. And the next morning, in one night, there were 16 of us still able to fight. Most of the others were too wounded to be able to fight, or they were killed. So we shrank from full strength to just a little more than a dozen men, still defending the hill 1240 at Udamne. And we held our position and pushed the enemy off the hill, and then we were given the word that we needed to attack in a different different direction to reach Hagaru, where there was an airfield that General Oliver Prince Smith ordered to be built to take care of the casualties. And that was a very wise move on General Smith, the commanding general of the 1st Marine Division. That was a wise move because we had lots of casualties. And I got on the plane there, laid off my ammunition and my grenades, got on that plane with my wounded. I got shot on a bridge somewhere west of Hagaru. The Chinese had machine guns up on a hill, and it was they were aiming at us at this bridge, just crossfire, and had a bullet go through my right forearm. And a corpsman, a Navy corpsman, put a battle dressing on my arm, stopped the bleeding, and I got on the airplane and flew back to Japan. There was a naval hospital at Yokosuka, Japan, and I ended up there that night. So from 8 in the morning on December the 4th, when I was shot, to that evening, I just couldn't believe I was still alive. And I was in that hospital, got a shower, got in a bed for the first time in a long time, and I was just so grateful to be alive. But the Navy took good care of us. I had 2 doctors look at my arm.
Yeah.
One, a young doctor, Navy doctor, he said, it looks like a flesh wound. Well, that young doctor was just looking at the point of entry where the .30 caliber machine gun shell entered. But the older doctor turned my arm over and he said, look, you're looking at the point of entry. This is the exit. The man has not had a flesh wound. He has a compound fracture of the right ulna in his right arm. Well, the good news was that compound fractures were what they called ambulatory walking wounded, but you didn't go back to the firing line. You couldn't function with a compound fracture of your right arm if you're right-handed. So the good news was it was a serious wound, but I didn't have to go back in the firefight, and I was not eager to go back.
Then where did you go from there? Did you?
At Yokosuka, Japan, I stayed there for, I don't know how long it was, probably a few weeks. Issued the Purple Heart, were combat wounded, and
You received the Purple Heart then?
yeah, there was no ceremony. I think some Navy hospitalman just tossed the little container on my bunk in the ward. I didn't care about the ceremony. I just kept it and healed up for a while. And then the decision was that broken bones would go stateside. I had frostbite of hands, feet, and ears, plus my gunshot wound on the right arm. So they said, well, we're going to ship you stateside. We'll get you to the closest Navy hospital to your hometown. What's your hometown? I said, Tulsa, Oklahoma. So they shipped me to Pensacola, Florida. Wasn't very close to home. I didn't care. Pensacola, Florida is known for its white sands and its warmth. So during the afternoons, I would walk out of the Navy hospital, go down to the beach and lay there under the sunlight, warm. The important thing to me was to be warm. It had been 42 degrees below zero where I was shot. And to be in Florida on those white sands under the nice warm sun was just an answer to prayer. I was so grateful to be there.
And you never went back to Korea?
No, not for active duty. A few years ago, the Korean War Veterans Association sponsored a revisit Korea. So my wife and sons and I went back to South Korea and enjoyed the hospitality of the Korean people. They're very grateful people. And that was my return. I had to have a passport to get there, and I told the people at the entry level, I said, I didn't have to have a passport when I came here first. They said, well, things are different. And they weren't different. I was glad to be back, and offered kimchi with almost every meal.
Do you like kimchi?
No, I never learned to like it. But it was all right, warm.
Yeah. How was it seeing it now so different? You know, they develop so much, right?
Oh, yes. It's wonderful how the Korean people have rebuilt their society. And when you compare that society to what's up north under Kim Jong-un, the misery that's up north is just tragic. And by the way, when I came back to Hagaru, we had a lot of refugees who were trying to get to Hungnam, and it created a problem. And when we got to Hungnam, the Navy ships were there, and they took 97,000 men, women, and children, and these are North Korean people, an enemy nation. We took 97,000 citizens of an enemy nation, North Korea, communist nation, and put them on our ships. And we almost depopulated North Korea. These were people voting with their feet. We don't want to stay under communist domination. But it was a wonderful humanitarian thing to take these people. And by the way, I've met some of those people who settled in Dallas, Texas, and they established restaurants and other businesses, and they've made a wonderful restart in a free nation, the United States. And it was a bright spot of that war. We were able to take civilians away from a terrible system and bring them back first to Busan in Korea, South Korea, and then back to the United States. And we have a great affinity for each other. The Korean people who live in the United States and the Americans who are so grateful that we were able to save them from a corrupt, tyrannical system.
Wow.
It may be that there is no such thing as a good war, because war is all about killing and devastation of environment. But compared to other wars, there were some very good things about the Korean War. I think Harry Truman, President Truman, did a very courageous and admirable thing when he decided that American troops would go in and intervene and push back the communist forces so that this new republic, South Korea, would have a measure of freedom that they would never have known had we not intervened. It was a good thing. I've always admired President Truman for that. Even though when he activated this Marine reservist, I had to go over there and suffer the terrible weather. It was just too cold. And then when they had, must have been 10 or 12 divisions of combat hardened Chinese infantry who came to destroy the 1st Marine Division, which they were unable to do. So anyway, it was quite an adventure for me. I remember on one day in early December, sitting on a hill in North Korea on Udamni and writing my dad back in Tulsa. I wrote him. I said, "Dear Dad, my birthday, as you know, is December 17th. That would be 1950. I had hoped to be around for my 20th birthday, but we are totally surrounded by innumerable troops. So I don't think I'm going to make my 20th birthday." And so I wrote a lengthy apology for being such a troublesome boy, which I had been. And so I wrote that letter and put an envelope in my field jacket and said, "Whoever finds this, please mail it to Henry S. Elwell, 906 South Cheyenne, Tulsa, Oklahoma." And when I got back to the hospital, at the Navy hospital in Yokosuka, Japan, I found that letter, and I wish I'd saved it. I threw it in the wastebasket. It sounded so melodramatic. After all, I did live till my 20th birthday. I surprised myself.
That's great. When you came back, what did your parents say? Do you remember how it was?
Oh, my dad had been following the news, and when the news said the 1st Marine Division was trapped and was in danger of being annihilated, he spent many anxious days worrying about his son. So he was very glad to see me.
Would you like some?
And I was very glad to see him.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. You see, I was the youngest son. He had 2 sons, and I was the bad boy. My older brother, 2 years older than I, he was always well behaved, and I was not. At age 5, I was at a dime store in Tulsa, and one of my kindergarten playmates came up and said, "Hey Larry, look, it's my birthday," and he showed me his brand new billfold with a new dollar bill in it, and I'm ashamed to say I grabbed his billfold and the money and took it away and ran down the alley. I was a thief, and a few days later a police squad car pulled up and they took me downtown and booked me for strong armed robbery. That's a crime. I'm unarmed anyway. It's a shameful thing to do, I'm sorry. That's the way I lived. And I shoplifted and did some vandalism, and my dad was always in court, the juvenile court, standing beside me and trying to get the judge to be merciful, and the judge was merciful. I remember the Judge Johnson said, "Well, young Elwell, you've got quite a rap sheet here. Look at all this you've done. Shoplifting, strong-arm robbery, vandalism. You've earned yourself a ticket to the prison. But you're very young, and you're not very big, and I know something bad would happen to you in prison. So I'm going to give you a break. I'm drawing you a chalk line. If you step across that line, and you end up in my courtroom again, you're going to prison. Now get out of my courtroom and go do something to improve yourself." Well, about that time, I was going to a nighttime education class, Dale Carnegie course in human relations, and I needed it. I signed up and went to the night school, and there was a staff sergeant, recruiting Sergeant Glenn Martin, a Marine, on active duty. He was one of my fellow students in that evening course, and he said, "Elwell, you've had quite a history. I think a term in the Marine Corps would help you a lot." So Glenn Martin signed me up in the Marine Reserve. I took the oath, signed the papers, and started going to the weekly drills at the Marine Reserve unit in Tulsa, Oklahoma. B Company, it was an infantry company, happily. And then when Harry Truman activated the reserves, that's when I got on a troop train, went to Camp Pendleton, got training. They didn't have time to send us through boot camp. We had to get over there as quickly as we could and save South Korea from communist domination. So the Marine Corps did a great deal for me. My misbehavior ceased because the Marine Corps takes away all of your options for bad behavior. You know, if you don't show up for muster, if you're out of step, out of line, there's a brig waiting for you, bread and water. And that's a great incentive to live a decent life. So the Marine Corps straightened me out pretty well. I was really grateful for it. I had some very fine commanders and non-coms who taught me to obey orders and live a decent life. So
And save a whole nation. And also save a whole nation.
yes, that was a good purpose. It wasn't just to straighten out a bad behavior in a teenage boy. It had a higher purpose than that. I've always been grateful for my experience. With the dog company, we had an excellent company commander. He was Captain Milton Arthur Hull, Hull. He was a China Marine. He had been in World War II in China as a saboteur behind enemy lines against the Japanese occupants. And he was just a splendid role model. He was wounded 3 times on U Dam Knee, our hill, and he refused evacuation. He had a through and through wound through his shoulder. He had fragments of enemy grenades pock-marking his face. But he was just so stalwart and strong and kept us encouraged, made us hold our positions. And I'll never forget Captain Hall. He was just brave and courageous and kept us cool and kept us encouraged. A very kind man, but very severe. You obey orders, you hold your position, and behave like Marines. So we came through a terrible time. Udam Knee was hit hard. At night, around 11 o'clock, the Chinese would attack. They would blow bugles, and they had a bunch of noisemakers. And I don't think the Chinese attackers knew much about the English language, but they had one phrase which they repeated often. They would call up to the hill, they'd say, "Tonight, Marine, you die." I believed them, but they were wrong. Instead, they died because we just held our positions, and it was a terrible time of slaughter. And the Chinese who attacked were very courageous. However, they had Thompson submachine guns. We were defending our hill with our M1, good rifle, but with a Thompson submachine gun, it fires 45 caliber rounds, and you don't have to aim. You just spray. And oh, we suffered a lot of casualties with their Thompsons. I looked at the butt plate on the machine guns that they were equipped with, and it said U.S. Armory, Bridgeport, Connecticut. American weapons against Americans. It was an unseemly sight. But we held our position, and I think overall the Lord overruled these communist forces and saved us from the weather. The weather was horrible. And from outnumbered enemy. But the Chinese troops who attacked, it took a lot of courage for them to attack us in our positions. And they did not have warm gear. They looked like more like pajamas and tennis shoes. And they'd still come forth and attack. So you had to respect what they were doing, obeying orders to destroy us. They just couldn't get it done. We had a lot of help though, because sometimes Captain Hall would see big groups of Chinese troops coming toward us. He'd call for an airstrike, and here would be these Marines or Navy corsairs coming in, treetop height, dropping these canisters of napalm, horrible stuff that at night on impact and just burn alive these Chinese attackers. It was all horrible for them, but it would keep them from destroying us. Mm-hmm. Their aim was to destroy the 1st Marine Division, and they could not get it done. It wasn't because they didn't have the manpower or the courage. They had that. But we just had the Marine esprit de corps And we had General O.P. Smith, the commanding general of the 1st Marine Division. He was a brilliant strategist, a fearless man, and he kept us together. And we came out of the trap and boarded the ships at Hung Nan and came on south and redeployed for future battles. Some of the fellows in my company, Dog Company, were prisoners of war of the Chinese for 3 years. And they suffered a lot, but we finally got them released. Harry Truman insisted on an exchange of prisoners, so the Chinese prisoners we had, we turned them back over to the Chinese, and the American prisoners that the Chinese had, the Chinese turned them over to us. So we had a prisoner exchange probably about August 1953 or so. So some of our prisoners of war from our company came home. It was quite a war.
So I feel that I don't know if I would ever experience anything like you did or your generation did. It's different now. So kids in the US and also kids in Korea, they watch movies about the Korean War, but I don't know, I'm not really sure if we really know. Of course we don't know. Then coming as a Korean War veteran who's experienced that and survived that kind of era, what do you think is important for us to know and for us to learn from what you have experienced, from where you're coming from? Whether it's the American kids or the kids in Korea, what do you think is important for the younger generations to keep in mind, don't forget, and learn from you?
That you try to defend the innocent. The civilians always suffer so much. And the South Koreans had not done anything to provoke the attack from North Korea and beyond China. And Harry Truman said, that's as far as it's going. We're not going to let this happen. So we lost a lot of people, of course, but we saved innocent people from being slaves of a communist system. And I'm grateful that I was able to participate in that. And I think I'd also say that we have within us as human beings a greater capacity to overcome hardship than we know, but it's there. When you think, I won't live through night, take that thought and stamp it out. You can, with the help of the Lord, live through the night and see the morning. And the morning is better. So you just can't get defeated in your own mind. You have to have confidence in yourself and in our case, in your fellow troops. You have to take care of each other and your family. Captain Hull was a benevolent father to Dog Company. He was a good dad, and he kept us together. Later on, he advanced in rank to being a colonel. Oh, and by the way, he received the Navy Cross for his splendid leadership at UDAMNE. And he was a regimental commander in Vietnam. So Captain Hall was World War II, Korea, Vietnam. He was a 3-war veteran. And he is a splendid company commander. I owe him much. One night, when the Chinese were so heavily attacking, he looked over at me and he said, "Elwell, I need you on the right flank. It's crumbling." I didn't know he knew my name. And I slipped over to the right flank and started firing and throwing grenades. And I kind of wish he hadn't known my name. But he did. He knew all of us. He was a very fine man. I couldn't ask for a better company commander. And all my buddies up there, they stayed in their positions. We took care of each other like a family, brothers. That's from Shakespeare, I think, Henry VI. We, fortunate few, a band of brothers who have shed our blood together. We are a band of brothers, and that's what we were. Brothers in arms. And I don't want anybody else to experience it. Sometimes I've seen fellows at reunions say, "Well, let's see, Elwell, you and your wife have had 4 sons. Did they all become Marines?" I said, No, I'm sorry. Of course, I'm delighted if they had the training and so forth, but I couldn't put them at risk and have them come back and have somebody say to their mother, hand them a folded flag and say, "From a grateful nation." I couldn't put my sons at that kind of risk because it would hurt their mother too much to lose them. But they're Marines at heart, and I still am. But I hope we can encourage people to defend freedom. And that's why I sometimes get in trouble with my little card. It says at the top of it, "Commemorating an epic battle in defense of freedom." But I've had friends, close friends, say, "Oh, you're defending warfare, killing people." Yes, I am. I'm defending the Korean War. It was a just effort to stop a terrible, tyrannical system from wiping freedom off the face of this earth. So the Korean people and the American people have a lasting bond. Freedom is worth fighting for and suffering for. And I have no regrets about taking the risks I did as a young man. And sometimes I'm just amazed to have lived this long.
I'm glad you did.
Well, I'm glad too.
Finally discharged from the Marines.
Oh, it would be 1952, and shortly thereafter, about 3 years after that, they had what they called the GI Bill, It was called a 5220 program. If you went to school, if you went to college, for 52 weeks, 1 year, the government paid you $20 on the GI Bill to help you through school. So I went to school, and for 52 weeks, 1 year, I got my $20. I was a parasite. I went to school and got my bachelor's degree in business management. Then I went beyond that and got the master's degree in broadcasting. And then I went off to the University of Oklahoma and earned the PhD in communication studies. And after that, I spent 30 years at various universities teaching communication and teaching public speaking, broadcast announcing, communication law, interpersonal communication, and I enjoyed very much being among the young people at the various universities. I was at University of Tulsa, University of Oklahoma, Oral Roberts University for 2 years, and a couple of community colleges, staying around young people, hoping to encourage them to communicate better, and with a strong emphasis on ethics, that you honor your audience, if it's one person or a group of many, and you show them respect and proper esteem and build each other up to be better human beings. Communication can do that if you understand some of the principles. So it was a good life. And then I retired maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I still stay in touch with a lot of my Marine Corps buddies. I send them greeting cards, birthday cards, and see them at reunions. So.
Any close friends that are also here today? Any of your close Marine?
Oh yes, yes.
Can you name a few of them? I wonder if I've met them already. If I interviewed them.
Joseph Correa, who's from the San Antonio, Texas area, is here. He was Dog Company, my company, and his name is Correa, and we pronounce it Korea. So we have Joseph Correa from Korea, the Korean War. He's here, and several other fellows I've seen are here, and we're still close buddies, still family. Yeah.
Wow.
You don't break the bond.
When did you get married, Nellie?
I got married to her in April of 1961. That's right.
Wow. So you were a thiefy little boy and then went to Korea, saved the country, and now a doctor in communication.
That's
and
true.
This emphasis on ethics, that is so impressive. You mentioned your dad. Oh, he would be so proud, right? Wow.
He'd be surprised. But he warned me. He said, you just don't obey the rules. If you see something in a store and you want it and you don't have the money to pay for it, you let it alone. Larry, you won't make yourself obey the rules. And if you keep on like this, there are places that will make you obey the rules whether you want to or not. Well, I found the Marine Corps was such a place.
Yeah. Wow.
They put on with no nonsense. So they took all that misbehavior out of me. I'm grateful.
I see. What would you like to say to your dad if he were here right now?
Well, I would thank him for putting up with me for all those years. I remember one day he was standing with me in this juvenile court, and the judge said, "Mr. Elwell, your son has shoplifted, strong armed robbery, vandalism, and all this. How do you account for that?" And my dad said, "Well, Your Honor, Larry's not a bad boy. He's just fallen in with the wrong crowd." And Judge Johnson looked down from his bench and he said, "Mr. Elwell, with all due respect, sir, it's your son who is the wrong crowd." He was right. I was the wrong crowd. Oh my.
But wow. Thank you for sharing your stories.
Well,
I'm so glad I got to do this.
well, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
thank you very much.